Hello, I'm Lauren Havens, Project Manager for Digital Collections at the University of Michigan Library. My presentation for DLF 2020 is One Place to Rule Them All, creating a shared documentation repository for our digital collections, the full life cycle of creation, maintenance, and sunsetting. A full list of the digital collections that I'll be referring to today is available at quod.lib.umich.edu. We currently have 217 digital collections that are maintained by our unit, Digital Content and Collections, referred to as DCC as I move forward in this presentation. We're part of the UM library within Library Information Technology, also referred to as LIT. So we in DCC are the technical experts who build the digital collections with the technical platform that many in LIT maintain. However, we require subject experts to bring us the content, to identify what should go into a digital collection. These subject experts might be other librarians or outside of the library entirely, like faculty members, museum curators, other libraries, or even beyond the university. Several years ago, we started to think seriously about starting work building a new technical platform for our digital collections. To build a new platform that could handle all of our existing digital collections and incorporate new functionality that we and stakeholders wanted, we needed to assess our existing collections and better understand them. This meant gathering information about them as a start. Because the documentation was not organized in one main area or anywhere that lots of people could search, I needed to email several individuals each time I was interested in finding anything about a specific collection. When I did start to reach out to people, the email with, "Hey, do you have any documentation for this specific collection?" then asked that individual that I was contacting to search their email, local drive, and any paper documentation that may be in offices. Anything those folks found was then shared back with me, one at a time as each individual responded. For any given digital collection, I regularly contacted 3 to 10 individuals. Multiply this over 200 digital collections, and it was overwhelming for me and the people I was reaching out to. Let me be clear that I understand how we got to this point. The unit that I now work in had morphed and changed over many years, had been involved in many different kinds of projects, and had even split away from another unit as responsibilities and needs changed. What they had done back then had made sense at the time, but now we needed something else because our needs have changed. The audience for documentation has shifted, and our responsibilities, even in maintaining collections, have morphed. So the existing documentation had been distributed across many people with single user access to most documents. Whether the item was in an individual's email or local drive, that piece of the documentation puzzle was accessible by a single individual, not discoverable by anyone else unless explicitly granted access. Documentation for which only one individual holds the key risk having everything lost when an individual leaves the organization. We also had physical documentation, which was certainly better than nothing, but offered its own issues. People physically near the paper files didn't know what all was in there when that was the only way to access the content. And even before the pandemic, not all the people who needed access to the documentation held in those paper files worked in the same building where the paper was kept. Some of us didn't even work in the same state. To be useful, documentation has to be accessible. It also took knowing that it was even there to know to search. Oh, Chris was here at the time this collection was created. Maybe I should ask her. So what was our solution? We decided to put our documentation into Atlassian Confluence. I am not advocating Confluence for everyone, and your solution may be very different from ours. As I walk through why we decided on Confluence for ourselves, though, I hope you'll consider similar needs requirements when considering what solution may work for you and the pros and cons of any solution. For us, using Confluence as our documentation hub solved 90% of our problems, but it isn't perfect. We recognize where it fails, and for us, the pros outweigh the cons. Again, other solutions may be a better fit for your situation. We needed something that everyone in our division, LIT, could access anytime, which for us meant that it needed to be a digital solution, not restricted to a physical location. We needed something that was not controlled by individuals, but could be accessed regardless of whether a given individual left the organization. It was secure enough to everyone in LIT, but protected from security issues by requiring authentication to log in. Confluence offered us the ability to search content with improved discoverability, either with keyword searching or browsing a hierarchy that we created ourselves. It offered long-term storage management since LIT has committed to this platform, and will help us migrate the documentation if and when we need to migrate to another solution down the road. It cost us nothing to start putting the documentation in here. It fit with our existing tech stack. We were already using Confluence for Unix-specific documentation, and we were using Atlassian and Jira, which could be incorporated directly into Confluence as well. The first thing we needed to understand was what exactly it was we wanted to capture, what was critical, what was optional, and how did we want to organize it. The most important documentation related to the digital collections themselves, their life cycle, status, and stakeholders involved. We didn't want to have information about all of the collections jumbled together but organized per collection. We needed a space for each digital collection to have documentation clearly available in an organized manner. While we knew towards the beginning of the project that we needed the structure of organizing by the collection, we didn't know exactly what it was we needed to know about each collection. That organization changed over time and continues to be an evolving process. When we started out, though, we just started putting any documentation we found into the Confluence page for that collection. Over time, the structure and organization of what we gathered started to take better shape, which I'll go into in a later slide. So we already had Confluence established within LIT with a section dedicated to each unit, like a section specific to DCC. Digital collections don't just belong to DCC or any other one group, though, so it didn't make sense to put this whole section just under one unit's area. That seemed exclusionary in a way we did not want to encourage, so we created a whole new section within Confluence just for digital collections, which is shown here. The main digital collections space, which is shown here, just captures the top of the page with the table of contents. It includes information about specific major partners, like museums with several digital collections, with separate pages as noted to note differences in our workflow with them as relating to creation and maintenance of their collections. Another section includes information about digital collections that are in progress or upcoming, even if we just have a heads up that they may come so that we can stay aware of any workload demands they may bring. Whenever a new digital collection is started, we create an individual page for it to track workflow and documentation. Part of this individual page is then gathered with macros to keep everything in sync into a table, as you can see here on the main digital collections page. This high-level snapshot includes stakeholders, the current status, collection name, dates, and more. So seeing everything here on the main digital collection space allows us to see at a glance what is going on or needs to happen to a collection rather than going to each collection page separately. Once the collection is completed, the high-level information about it moves to a table down the page for completed collections, keeping the in-progress and completed collections separate. The completed collections table has more information that was too large to adequately show here, but it contains information we need to know at a glance similar to the in-progress collections, but also whether the collection's metadata is in our OAI for aggregators to grab. We also have a table for what we call zombie collections, which is our term for collections that started and never got finished. Some of these might be resurrected at some point, and others may not, but we don't want to lose information about them in case they do come up again. Closing a collection is carefully considered and discussed with stakeholders ahead of time. We have several kinds of criteria we take into account when considering whether to sunset a collection. Is the content hosted elsewhere? We have had digital content that was originally created by collaborations with other organizations, and another organization ultimately held the content in a better condition. So it made sense for us to remove the duplicate, lesser quality content. How much use is the collection currently getting? I look at statistics from the past few years as a gauge to see how popular it is and how many users will be affected. When to remove the content can disrupt even the few people using it, so we rarely want to remove it in the middle of a semester, even if we're putting up a redirect to the content fully available elsewhere. Stakeholders may trigger the closure by asking us to close the collection. Are the stakeholders even around anymore? One of the issues with collections being created over several decades is that sometimes stakeholders vanish through retirement or moving on to other organizations. Redirects for users. Do we need to put up a redirect immediately or post a notice ahead of time that the content is moving elsewhere? Are there access level changes to the content? If our digital collection is openly accessible to the public, but access to the replacement content, like through a subscription, is going to be limited to authorized users, a large portion of our users may be affected. If some portion of users will be disproportionately affected, we need to take that into special consideration and likely not lose the content. When we start to sunset a digital collection, we have a checklist of steps that we need to go through in the same way as we do when creating the collection. I have a template checklist as a page that I copy and paste at the bottom of the digital collection being sunset to make sure that we check off all of the steps as we sunset the collection. The checklist has gone through a lot of evolution as we've started to sunset or finish sunsetting digital collections in the past couple of years, and I expect it will continue to evolve in the same way that our checklist for creating a collection is continuing to change. Even once all of those steps are finished, completing the sunsetting process, we don't throw all of the documentation out when we sunset the collection. Besides the historical curiosity kinds of information that the documentation provides, I've learned that even when you're pretty sure you've gotten rid of everything about a digital collection, pieces of it might linger across the technical platform that need to be cleaned up at some point, or will cause questions to pop up at the very least. As I noted previously, everyone in LIT already has access to Confluence, so we didn't need to apply any special permissions to anyone in LIT to get the content. However, there are partners outside of LIT who need to see this information, even occasionally. We couldn't give everyone in the library access to Confluence for cost and licensing reasons. Our agreement only provides a certain number of users. There are some people within the library who knew this information, though, so we could grant access to a few key people. We did this for partners within the Library Copyright Office, for example, since they needed to see all of the documentation we had about a given collection when creating a rights memo and in assessing access level. When we were considering moving to Confluence for our documentation repository, we talked with our partners who might be affected, like those at Bentley. Since we were considering changing the workflow we had established with a valuable partner, we needed to consult with them. We got their thoughts and buy-in before making the change, rather than pushing it on them with no chance for input. With special users from outside LIT, we created a kind of template user with our architecture and engineering group, which controls access to Confluence and user authentication. By recognizing who has access currently and who needs access, we were able to overcome most of the access issues relating to Confluence as our choice for documentation. This aspect of access and making sure that the right people have access while staying secure was our biggest win in moving content away from individual control, but it's still something we have to consciously keep in mind, especially when we have specific individuals who need to have access granted periodically. And since Confluence is not used by other departments within the library, it's just LIT right now, and our collaborations and workflows with others in the library may change over time in ways that we need to share more explicitly. I get excited about templates, and I really love the one that is currently serving as a template for the workflow for creating new digital collections. This workflow was originally based on steps that had been noted in Google Docs that the former project manager in my role had been using, and the process has changed over time as our relationships with stakeholders have changed. Technical requirements evolve, and even our relationship with the library's marketing and communications office has grown. I only have snippets of the workflow showing here because it's just so long, but I wanted to give you a sense of what this template is like. I can't imagine starting a digital collection from scratch without something to start with to make sure that we address each step consistently for each project. This is a snippet from the template for creating an image class collection, a specific kind of digital collection for us that focuses on images and displaying visual rather than textual content. Whenever we start to create a new digital collection of this type, I copy this page and create the new digital collection page within the digital collections Confluence space. So we capture administrative information like the collection ID, which is used throughout our technical platform, the status of the rights memo, saving a copy of the memo itself when the Library Copyright Office has completed it, our stakeholders within LIT and beyond, including donors, the checklist table for each step in the process of creating the new collection, from receiving the initial request through launching and publicizing it, as well as who is responsible for that step. Then any progress or notes after launch, including work, updates to the interface, metadata enhancements, rights statement changes, or edits requested by the content stakeholder. All of the work around the creation and later maintenance is kept on this page. Ideally, everything we need to know about a given digital collection is in its Confluence page. Moving the documentation from the scattered places where it has lived to this point is still a process that is ongoing, though it's not as frequent as it used to be. And documentation will always be a work in progress, adding as we find relevant information and maintaining the collections. Thank you to everyone in Library Information Technology, the University of Michigan Library, and our many stakeholders for making these digital collections possible. Thank you for taking the time to view this presentation. Please email me if you would like to see any example templates or have any questions.